monsters and ghosts to otherworldly beings. Join the Explorers as they venture into the darkest realms, seeking the truth to what goes bump in the night.
And good evening, and welcome to Explorers, Seekers of the Truth, Phantom Hitchhikers. I am joined today by my best friend and co-host, who evidently loves to turn the audio on at the last second. Lesson Cabbage.
It's on loop. I'm doing good, buddy. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that.
I don't even know what show we're doing right now.
Yeah, right. We're in a different world now. No, hey, we finally got the intro back up and running. It's just that every time I play the intro music, it unfortunately decides to replay itself if I don't turn it off at the right second. So what can you do? But yes, thank you for being here as well, my friend. Always a pleasure to do our, weekly thing here. And as we, discuss all the time before the show, you could reach us at different avenues through different sorts of social media at our website, www.explorersgroup.com. You can find us at Twitter at Explorers Group. You can find us on Facebook as well, which is where you're viewing right now at facebook.com backsplash Explorers. Okay, now we are done with that. And as we always say before, hey, Michelle, she gets it. You could comment on Facebook as underneath our little show window, if you will. BeLive is the program or the software that we use in conjunction with Facebook to do our show. So whenever you comment on the Facebook comments underneath our show box, if you will, whatever, it populates on BeLive and we could communicate back and forth. So as you can see, my friend Michelle just commented and we got her comment here on BeLive. So thanks for commenting, Michelle, and thanks for joining in on this Cluster F adventure. So, Chad, take it away.
Oh, well, thanks. That's such a great intro to what we do.
You got it.
So tonight we're going to talk about and give you guys an idea, a little bit of a phenomenon that has been pretty much reported for centuries. It goes by a few different names: vanishing hitchhiker, ghostly hitchhiker, disappearing hitchhiker. And basically the legend is, as a person's traveling, they pick up this hitchhiker, and then the hitchhiker vanishes without explanation. Mm-hmm. And the weird thing is, it's often while the vehicle's still moving. And like I had just said earlier, it's been around for centuries. It's not a automobile phenomenon like, oh, there's cars, so this new phenomenon. There's also a variation of this where I'll save that, and I have something else for that a little bit later. So, Les?
Yeah, give me 1 second. I'm just trying to readjust my stupid monitor here. But no. Yeah, you did say Phantom Hitchhiker, right? Or did I lose?
Hitchhiker.
Hold on 1 second. I'm sorry. I just screwed myself up here. Anywho, yeah. So in 1981, Jan Harold Brunyard wrote the book The Vanishing Hitchhiker. And if I could find, here we are. That's what I'm looking for. I could show you the book here really quick, as we have displayed there, The Vanishing Hitchhiker. His book helped launch public awareness to the legend. His book traces the legend back to at least the 1870s and draws recognizable parallels to the stories in like Korea, SARS, Russia, Chinese Americans, Mormons, and the people of the Ozark Mountains as well. So that's a book you could check out there.
Yeah, it's a pretty book.
Yeah,
so,
it is pretty.
There are a few Sorry, I'm chewing gum tonight, folks. A few common variations of the story that involve the Phantom Hitchhiker. Yeah, the basis of this is the vanishing hitchhiker departs as a normal passenger would, having left some item in the car or having borrowed a garment for protection against the cold or the rain, basically against the elements.
Mhm.
The next little bit on that is the hitchhiker can also leave some form of information that allegedly occurs to the motorist as part of almost a premonition or a guide, like almost like a guardian angel might offer up.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in a lot of the stories with the borrowing of a garment, a lot of times the subsequent garment is found draped over a gravestone in a local cemetery. And in the instance of the imparted information, the unexpected motorist subsequently makes contact with the family of the deceased person, and finds that the passenger fits the description of a family member, killed in some unexpected way, usually a car accident, because they're usually, found along roads and stuff like that. And it usually, in that case, sometimes happens around the anniversary of the death, or at least of the accident.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Oh, Christ. If I could get this stupid thing to work. Here we go. Yeah, there's also a twist to that legend, too. Sorry, I had to straighten out my screens. I'm having issues here. Always a technical issue here and there. But there's a twist to the legend that you're talking about there, too. And there's a kind of a reversed scenario on that, if you will, where the hitchhiker is a living human, where the hitchhiker is alive, and then later learns that the driver is actually an apparition of a person who died earlier. Other variants include hitchhikers who utter prophecies, like Chad had said, like there's some sort of a prophetic message or something like that, typically pending of catastrophe or other evils before vanishing.
So
Which
basically,
I think is. Huh?
I was going to say,
No,
basically.
You go. Boy, we are butchering it tonight.
I was going to say, basically, that's the Large Marge scenario from Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
Yeah, which is one of the most classic hitchhikers, reverse scenario hitchhikers, where Pee-wee was the man hitchhiking along the highway, gets picked up by a trucker, and he has a full-on conversation, and she talks about basically the accident which took her life. And when she dropped him off at the local bar, she tells him to tell the people in the bar that Large Marge sent him, and they then revealed to him that he was driving with her ghost, which is probably one of the best scenes from a movie I've ever seen. I love that, and it scared the crap. I watched that with Lily. It's so funny, and for like a month, she wouldn't go to sleep, and every time she had to go in her room without one of us, she'd be like, "But Large or." What she Marge Large? She used to reverse it. She's like, Marge Large is in there. I'm like, no, she's not in there. It's so
That's
funny.
Cute.
Yeah, it is, but at the same time, it's just funny that would scare her.
Yeah. So it's story time. I get a time to tell a little ghost story on this, Phantom Hitchhiker
exciting.
episode. So imagine you're sitting on a train, and there's a person of the opposite sex or the same sex. I do not judge your preferences. But they're reading a book. And as they're reading, they're really consuming the book at a rapid pace. So you look over to ask them what the book's about. Figured you're going to be on a train for, a couple of hours. So you ask, kind of strike up a conversation, and they barely acknowledge your question. And they say, it's a book about ghosts. And you think to yourself, being somebody like us, you're like, ooh, this is interesting. Somebody that's reading a book about ghosts and the paranormal, and I'm into it too. So you start to strike up that conversation about the paranormal. Then they turn to you and they ask you, do you believe in ghosts, or have you ever seen one? You start to answer the question the only way you know how. As you look out the window to avoid that uncomfortable moment, that look from people when you answer questions like that, and you give them your answer and you hear them say, "You have now." And as you turn back, the person is completely gone. They've vanished from the train car, and nobody has record of seeing them.
That would be creepy if that actually happened. Well, it does kind of parlay into like the Phantom Hitchhikers. I mean, it happens in all different kind of scenarios, not just, you know, automobiles, but trains as well, because there's been catastrophic train wrecks and whatnot. So there are stories abound about phantom people on different forms of transport. There's stories similar of subways in New York City and stuff like that in the old subway lines where, you know, people would be sitting there talking and having a full-on conversation. They turn their head and they look back, and the person that they're talking to is completely gone, and there's nowhere for them to go. They were the only two people in the car, you know, and all of a sudden, boom, the person's gone. But yeah, that would be scary as all get out. But so let's I guess should we segue into our first topic of the Phantom Hitchhiker legends?
Actually, let me bring up a point, or kind of add to what you just said.
Sure.
A lot of airlines, people who, you know, work on a flight crew, you know, your stewardess, stewards, your pilots, your co-pilots, your different, you know, people, when questioned about, like, oh, can airplanes, you know, be haunted? A lot of them will tell you, yeah, and it's because of the number of crashes and how sometimes they actually avoid numbering certain planes certain ways because of the past history of a crash or something like that. So yeah, I mean, this phenomenon can happen not just in automobiles. Like I said, it dates back centuries. So you're talking about something that goes back to horse and buggy times. You know, it's not something that just, oh, because cars were invented, people started this, you know, folklore.
Right,
So
right.
I think we can start segueing into the beautiful stories of the Phantom Hitchhiker.
Yeah. Well, like you said about the airlines and stuff, the only way to get to our next topic would be by plane or by boat. We're going to be heading to the island state of Hawaii, and one of the most known Phantom Hitchhikers is the fire goddess Madame Pele. In the Hawaiian religion, Pele pronounced, I guess Pele, right? Is how it's pronounced.
Yeah.
I don't know. The fire goddess is the goddess of fire, ironically, lightning, wind, and volcanoes, and the creator of the Hawaiian Islands. She's a well-known deity within Hawaiian mythology and is notable for her commentary, her contemporary presence and cultural influences as an enduring figure from ancient Hawaii. Yeah, what else? Pele of this. Oh gosh, I lost track where. Yeah, the goddess is also known as Pele of the sacred land, and oh gosh, I'm going to butcher this. You had to have these Hawaiian terms on my segment, didn't you?
Just use the English. Nobody here speaks pidgin, okay?
Yeah, Kawani. I don't even know how to the earth eating woman.
Hana.
There you go. There you
And
go.
for some scary reason, that just flew out of me with not even thinking. Yeah, she's the earth-eating woman. So basically, there is Pele's curse, which is the belief, you know, that anything natively Hawaiian, such as sand, rocks, pumice, if taken away, will cause bad effects on the person who takes them. It's the old Brady Bunch, Tiki doll taken from the cave, Mr. Hanalei episode. Throwing out random references. I don't care if you don't get them. You know, and it's said that she comes in many forms. You know, people will report seeing her as a beautiful young woman with a flowing red crimson dress and the blackest of hair. Others have
Mhm.
seen her as an old woman. Yeah, there we go. There she is.
Yeah, kind of like this little
Yeah.
picture here.
And other people have seen her as an old woman. Many encounters with Pele have her being seen as a hitchhiker on the islands. And, you see this, you're a guy, you have a lot of military and you have a lot of, guys living single in Hawaii. So you see this beautiful Hawaiian woman walking along a road. It's, it's a tropical desert or a tropical island, not desert. Wow. Wrong country. And, so you offer her a ride. And a lot of times, like, the stories go that she'll ask for cigarettes, basically seeing who respects her request and who doesn't. Other mentions of her, they have her being accompanied by like a white dog. And that is actually that is said to be a sign of upcoming volcanic eruptions. And, so it's, that's a little prophecy type stuff there.
Now, let me ask you a question. I don't know if you could answer this. I mean, when she's seen with the dog, they say it's a sign of an oncoming volcanic eruption. Is there any other mythology about a white dog on the island, or is it just seen with her?
I don't know of any other mythology in the island chain that involves a white dog. Not saying that there isn't. I'm just saying I've never heard from the people I know that have lived in Hawaii and stuff like that they've ever mentioned a white dog.
Right. I knew you had a lot of connections out there, but I wasn't sure if they had mentioned. All right. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just was curious.
Yeah. So, I had said earlier about, the myth of anything taken as a souvenir causes bad luck. And, although this is a myth and it's said to have been made up, hundreds of rocks are sent back every year with notes asking the people that they send them to return them and to take them back, to the point where the Hawaiian Volcanic National Park does not want people to write articles about Madame Pele because of the number of rocks that get returned every time there's an article. Basically, every time there's an article written, there are tons of rocks that just get sent back. Nora Judd, one of the park rangers, received about 5 packages a day from visitors wanting to return something they took from the island.
These are actually some of the rocks that have been returned there that we're showing on screen now.
Yeah, a majority of the stuff taken is like lava rock, sand, coral, figurines, jewelry made from the lava. That's some of the common stuff they get back. And basically, all the people that send stuff back basically have these very sad stories. Their house was broken into, they broke their legs, somebody died. They heard about the curse, taking things off the island. They send it back with humble apologies, hoping that the curse is broken. So there's a couple good books out there about Madame Pele. And it's not just about the Phantom Hitchhiker parts, but the goddess. Yeah, there we go. The Goddess of the Hawaiian Volcanoes by Herb Cain. There's Madame Pele, True Encounters with the Hawaiian Fire Goddess by Rick Carroll. Les is on ball today. He's just popping this stuff up.
Damn right. I couldn't find the other book that we have in our notes, the 365 Goddess by Patricia Telesco. I couldn't find anything on that. Otherwise, I'd have popped up an image. And if anybody is interested in any of these books or want to learn more about the story of Madame Pele, just let us know. We could put a link up on our Facebook page that could direct you to purchasing that book. But if you don't care, then don't say anything. But now we're going to head to Chicago to discuss probably the most famous Phantom Hitchhiker story in the mainland USA. And although stories of vanishing hitchhikers in Chicago date back to, like Chad said before, a lot of the stories date back to the the days of horse-drawn carriages, the horse and buggy days. This tale begins in the mid-1930s. It starts with drivers going along Archer Avenue, reporting strange encounters with a young woman in a white party dress. She appears to be a real person, but somehow she vanishes suddenly. The first few reports state that while driving, God, excuse me, I had a Stromboli tonight, and the acid is killing me. I'm sorry. The first reports state that while driving past the Resurrection Cemetery, a woman dressed in white would attempt to jump onto the running boards of moving automobiles, where she'd be seen walking down the road. But she makes herself known, and being that she is an attractive younger woman in a dress, most times people stop. So,
yeah. Now,
what else you got on that?
Not long after these original reports, the woman becomes more mysterious and more alluring. And the strange encounters begin to move away from the cemetery and closer to the O'Henry Ballroom, not O'Hara, the Scarlett O'Hara, but no, it's the O'Henry Ballroom.
There you go. Here it is.
Which is now known as the Willowbrook.
Which, side note, if you don't mind me interrupting, and maybe you're going to talk about it. This Willowbrook, I believe, and the ballroom was featured on many popular TV shows. I think Ghost Adventures was out there, Ghost Hunters was out there with different reports, and I think there was reports of an apparition of some sort in the swimming pool area or something, if I remember correctly. Or no, there was a fountain or something in there where they would see the apparition of a young child.
I think that isn't the same location. You're correct on the there was a brook that ran through a hotel and they would see the little girl in the water. That wasn't in Chicago. That was somewhere out west in some old hotel.
Take what I just said and forget about it for this show then. But this is the Willowbrook that we're talking about in Chicago.
Yeah. So she's been reported near the roadways sometimes, and also she's actually been reported inside the ballroom.
Which I believe I have a picture of that too.
Yeah, wow. So on many occasions, young men would meet a girl in the ballroom, dance with her, then offer her a ride home, of course, as every guy would do at the end of the evening. And she always accepts, but offers very vague directions that would lead them north on Archer Avenue. And basically, at that point, when the car would reach the gates of the cemetery, the woman would always vanish.
Yeah, the Resurrection Cemetery, hence Resurrection Mary. Yeah, so picture this, right? You're at a local dance hall, and you notice this very attractive person. You've seen them several times before, but tonight is the night you finally are going to ask them to dance, right? So you're waiting close to the door for them to come in. You look away for a second, and then you notice them somehow standing against the wall right in the area you were looking just a second ago. So you head over, and you ask them if they want to dance. They accept, and you spend the next several hours together dancing, talking. Strangely, you have noticed that they seem distant, and you notice that their skin is very cold, almost icy to the touch. When you finally go to kiss them, you find their lips are as cold and clammy as the night. At the end of the evening, they ask you for a ride home. When you get to your car, they direct you to drive down Archer Avenue, just like Chad had said. You're a little confused because earlier they've mentioned where they lived, and it's nowhere near Archer Avenue. When you question them, they just state that they want to go down the avenue. As you drive down the street and approach the gates of the pictured Resurrection Cemetery, they ask you to pull over. They say, I have to get out here. Confused, you agree, but you ask, can you walk them across the street? But they refuse to allow you. They turn in their seat to face you and say, this is where I have to get out, almost in a whisper. but where I'm going, you can't follow. Which is basically the story of Resurrection Mary on how the events usually unfold. Is you spend a lot of time with her, and then all of a sudden she's gone at the end of the night, which is frightening if it would happen to me.
Well, come on, it has happened to you, and it wasn't Resurrection Mary.
Yeah, it was every woman I ever tried to talk to. Yeah.
Well, actually, Les, that's the story of Jerry Paulus. That's one of the most famous Resurrection Mary stories. His encounter took place in 1939, and it left such an impression on him that until the day he died in 1992, he remained an unshakable witness and appeared on several television shows to discuss, his night with Resurrection Mary. And if you kind of think about it, he had little to nothing to gain and no reason to lie about it. He never doubted the fact that he spent this night with a beautiful spirit. So, I mean, when you look at it, it's like, it's not the modern day phenomena of, if I say this place is haunted or I say this, building's haunted and I tell you all it's haunted. I basically talk you into believing it's haunted. And now I'm going to sell you a ticket to go, take a chance to win a tour of a haunted building or I'm going to sell you a tour of a haunted building. So this guy really, he had nothing. First of all, it's 1939 when this happens. That would be probably one of the worst times to ever be like, I spent a night with a ghost. People would be like, okay, we have these homes for people like you, so let's just take you on this little car trip and we'll never deal with you again.
Right.
It's kind of, it kind of gives you at least a semi-decent eyewitness to all this. And other people basically report the same story, over the years that it's just, kind of comes back around.
Which I guess in the classification of spirits or paranormal activity, this would more or less be considered like a residual haunting.
Well,
but a really like detailed residual haunting. Oh no, actually, it'd probably be more of a combination of a residual and intelligent. Yeah, because it's not just happening repeatedly or.
It's not like a loop.
Right. It's like, but it's more around the time of the anniversary of her death, but so in that sense, it kind of makes it residual, but at the same time, she's interacting with people throughout different time frames and different scenarios.
That actually, kind of brings a question up in my head.
Which is? Okay.
Well, I'm going to tell you if you give me a second. Dude, guitar. You think about it, she's seen in a white dress. Now, a white dress from the 1930s, 1920s, 1930s, whatever, would that not look out of place? A white party dress? Or are these guys just so enamored with this person? Because he even said he saw her several times before at this dance hall.
Right.
It was one of those things almost like, does she appear to certain people, like a certain type of person, that she doesn't seem out of place to that person? Because, if you saw a ghost from 1930, you'd kind of look at them like, even if it was a mobster from the 1930s. Yeah, the guy's in a suit. It's a nice suit, but it wouldn't quite look like a suit does nowadays, even though it's a suit.
Right, because it was styled slightly different than the way suits are styled today. And the same goes with the dresses. It would almost be like when people like, well, let's say like down in Gettysburg, when 9 times out of 10, when people see apparitions, they're dressed in the period from the Civil War, from the 1800s, or the period of which they died. So you could clearly discern that they're not from this
time,
this era. Yeah. You know, so I guess that is a good question. I mean, wouldn't you kind of realize that she's not dressed modern? So I don't know. That's or do more recent reports state the style of dress? You know what I mean? Is it just a white dress, or is it a white dress that didn't look from this time? You know.
Yeah.
But I think you might be right where the cemetery in a dress. You know what I mean? Or you know. But if they did see her at the dance,
yeah, that would be.
You know,
like the one walking by the cemetery or along a road, I don't think you would see it would take you a minute to figure out that they're not wearing something from this time frame.
Right.
I had a friend who was out early one morning, and there's a stoplight, and it's a weird stoplight because it's 2 stoplights and it allows you to make turns at the second light. So like you kind of go through the first light so that like trucks and stuff can turn. It keeps you back, and then you get to the second light. Now they're sequenced that when they turn green, they're both green.
Right,
well,
right.
She pulled up to the first light, and she saw a guy standing across the road, and it was like a sleet snow mix.
Yeah.
And she thought, wow, that guy's really nicely dressed for this hour of the morning. And then she thought, and as she was looking at him, she's like, he's not in a raincoat. So she thought, well, maybe he broke down and was walking somewhere. And she's like looking at him, and then she realized like he's not getting wet. Like the moisture didn't seem to be affecting his clothes and him walking. But it took her a minute of actually sitting at a light and being able to process like, oh, there's somebody standing over there. Oh, they're in a nice, outfit. Oh, that outfit doesn't quite, it was in the 2000s, and basically the person looked like they had a 1970s tuxedo on with the big, like, kind of ruffled front and leisure, like, collars. So it took him a couple minutes. Now, I could see if you're driving down the road, you're the typical man. You see a young lady walking by herself who doesn't look like she's on crack. You might be more inclined to stop and be like, ma'am, do you need a ride? And you're not really thinking like, oh, she's in a white dress, and the dress that we're guys, we don't notice that. We just noticed a woman walking on the road.
Right.
So I guess, but I mean, if you saw her in the dance hall, you would have to you would have had a longer time. Yeah. And the fact that you've seen her before.
Unless there's some sort of supernatural element to it where you're almost entranced because maybe other people aren't really catching on. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where you're almost like just kind of lured into the supernatural element of it, and there's more going on than just seeing an apparition. That your mind is being played more or less to see what the thing wants you to see, or the spirit wants you to see.
Now, here's the thing: if you see the ghost and nobody else sees the ghost, and you're dancing with said ghost, why are there no videos of dudes just cutting a rug at this ballroom by themselves?
I don't know.
Or is it that your mind, it's your mind's being played, and you think you're dancing, you think you're having this great night, and in reality you're sitting there by yourself, with it, just at a table, and you're in your mind all this stuff is happening. Which then makes me wonder if it's even, in a scenario like that, would make me wonder if this is even real. Like, more so than I already wonder.
I don't know. Yeah, because with a lot of the reports, it's usually that one person experiencing it. There's no other interaction with other people.
Yeah, they don't really like. It's not like, oh, you and I went out, many of nights when we were
Yeah.
younger, and if we would have ran into like Schaefer and them, which we did on occasion, we both talked to Schaefer. We both had communications and hung out. You would remember that. I would remember that. If you and I went somewhere and you just wandered off and were dancing by yourself, I would be, kind of questioning what the hell's going on. And if you
honestly, I don't think you would be bothered by that at all. You'd be like, well, that's less,
I would just have the video camera up. At least I'd have evidence.
That's right.
Less seems to be dancing with this orb.
Yeah, right. So back to the topic at hand of Resurrection Mary. So I guess the basic legend of Mary kind of goes where Mary had spent the evening dancing with a guy or a boyfriend or whatever at the O. Henry Ballroom, and at some point they got into an argument, and Mary stormed out. Even though it was a cold winter's night, she thought she would rather face a cold walk home than spend another minute with her boyfriend. She left the ballroom and started walking up Archer Avenue. She had not gotten far when she was struck and killed by a hit-and-run driver who fled the scene, leaving Mary to die. Her parents found her and were grief-stricken at the sight of her dead body. They buried her in Resurrection Cemetery wearing a beautiful white dancing dress and matching dancing shoes. The hit-and-run driver was never found. So to kind of your point before, that's like when people would get in the cars or whatever, and then, if something of theirs was taken, they would find it then later where they, because I had seen documentaries and whatnot and some of them were involving Resurrection Mary, where, one person picked her up, they were driving, and I think he gave her his jacket, and she left with the jacket on. And then when, later that night, or as time had gone on, a couple days or so, he got to talking to people, and they said, oh, well, maybe it was Mary, and they had mentioned that she was at the cemetery, and they found the jacket on the headstone, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, it just makes me wonder if I'd want my jacket back after that. I mean, if she died in the 1930s and it's 2017, that's a lot of rot.
It's pretty stanky, yeah.
Yeah. So, some researchers have actually attempted to link Resurrection Mary to one of the, many of thousands of burials in Resurrection Cemetery. There's basically two names that kind of stick out for Resurrection Mary. Some people have focused on a woman by the name of Mary Berghoff, who died in 1934. Her death occurred in an automobile, but it didn't occur in the area of Archer Avenue.
Okay.
It occurs in the Chicago Loop, which is downtown. So that's one possible connection. Now, like I said, she doesn't die anywhere near Archer Avenue.
It was more or less just a similar scenario.
It's a woman named Mary. Who
died by a car accident.
Yeah, and she died in the 1930s. The stories start in the mid to late 1930s. So she died in 34, 35, 36. The stories start. It gives you a woman named Mary, dies in the 1930s, right? Prior to this, phenomena starting with this Resurrection Mary, and she dies in an automobile. Now, there is a second woman. Her name is Anna Merjai Norsky, which is actually like I think Czech or something version of Mary. It's Eastern European, basically, version of Mary. So she's like Anne Mary Norschek. Or she went by Mary. I don't know. But she died in 1927 in an automobile accident while on her way home from, guess where?
Where?
The O. Henry Ballroom.
Ah, well, that's definitely more of a solid link.
Yeah. That theory has gained more popularity in the recent years. One of the interesting parts of this legend is that the story and encounter they continue all the way up to present day.
Right.
A lot of people say it's an urban legend about Mary. Like one of my issues with that, and I always tell people, like, follow the money. If there's money to be made, that's where some of the stories come from. But there's really no money to be made basically retelling a almost 100-year-old story. You're not getting paid to be on television as somebody who's being interviewed about Resurrection Mary. Right. You're not, the cemetery doesn't allow you to ghost hunt there. So, and let's face it, it's Chicago. Well, it's actually Justice, which is a suburb of Chicago, where the cemetery actually is. But if anybody's turned on the news and looked up Chicago and the crime statistics, or just listened to the news when there's 47, homicides on a given Saturday night in the city of Chicago, also some of the world's toughest gun laws. That's another point. But so there's no real, like, we always kind of point to, like, where's the money to be made on this? Like, how is retelling a 100-year-old ghost story with you being the person? It's not like you're telling, oh, I ran into a ghost at Knoebels or Dorney Park or Disney World, where you might be like one of only 10 people that could tell that story. You're telling a story that has just been told and told and told. And, if these people are actually, taking a lie detector and passing it, they've definitely felt, they believe they had an interaction with the spirit. Right. This spirit in particular. But it doesn't make a lot of sense to, lie about it, because you're not making money. You're not gaining fame. You're telling, Jerry Paulus's story that happened in 1939. You're basically retelling his story in putting you in it and modern day whatever, music or cars or whatever. So I don't really see a reason for the continuation of it, other than neither people are actually having these interactions, or it's just the urban legend of it. And maybe some of these people don't really even exist. You make up a name, Les Smith, in 2016 had an encounter on a Friday night with Resurrection Mary. Well, you could look up Les Smith and find a million of them, in a given area. Smith is the most common last name in America, or was. Yeah. So it's not like you come up with a variant of that name, Joe, John, something like that. You're not going to ever, unless you know that person particularly, you or I who don't live in that area aren't going to know that person's real or not. Right. But again, it still doesn't make sense.
Yeah, well, it's like you said, how many of them have, what's the validity behind half these stories? It's hard enough to figure out the validity of the story of itself, let alone the validity of all the offshoots or all the witnesses or the people that experienced it. So that's how legends are born, I guess, you know.
Well, I was
don't know.
born
Alls I
differently.
Well, yeah, you and me both. But I don't know. I think that story is interesting just for the simple fact of how it is, you know. And it kind of reminds me of a story, a kind of a local story when my dad was younger. And I can't remember if it was the Burma Road, which I think is between St. Clair, Pennsylvania, and I think it goes up by, I think it comes out at the top of Monte City, above Monte City on Route 54, right? Do you know where the Burma is?
Yeah, I know where it is. I'm trying to think of where it comes. I honestly haven't driven on it in
Yeah, I
10,
think it's the one that goes
20
down
years.
into St. Clair. It's either that or the Vulcan, which is, I think, the road that goes down into Mahanoy City. I can't remember, but it was on one of those two. Yeah, the Vulcan, one of those two roads. And my dad said he was driving down the road the one time, and it was at night, and along the road he saw a woman walking down the side of the road in a long white flowing dress. And he said it was late at night, and he pulled over, and I guess in the brake lights he looked back, and there was nobody there. There was nobody on the road. And I apparently a few other people have actually experienced that too. So it's just kind of in part with the not necessarily somebody hitchhiking, but a phantom being along the roadside at night. So
Well, that
pretty
reminds me
creepy.
of a, yeah, that kind of reminds me of a story.
What's
It
that?
was a dark desert highway.
It was a rainy night. Well, actually, I think you remember this story too. It's not necessarily a Phantom Hitchhiker. It's again one of the kind of, I guess, reverse scenarios, if you will. But do you remember when you're coming out of Pottsville and on 61 South, and you could turn left back Tumbling Run Road? It's right across from Wiener's Junkyard. You know what I'm talking about? Where the Tumbling Run Reservoir is. That road?
Are you seriously asking me if I know where that is?
Yes.
Okay.
So
I grew up.
I know you grew up there. I know. So you know
That's
where
why
I'm talking about.
I thought you were
obviously.
talking to somebody else at this point because you're like,
No, I'm talking
you know where
to
that
you.
is? Well, why would you ask me
All
that?
right.
I know. Yes, I know where that is, Les. I'm sorry.
All right, D-head. Moving along. So you know obviously where the road is. Well, have you heard the story about the Phantom car? I'm sure you heard of this one.
Yeah, I think that a lot of times is something told to keep kids from driving fast and stuff out there.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Just to tell the audience, the story, or I guess you could call it
legend.
or hoax or spoof story to scare kids. The story is when you're driving out Tumbling Run, and I think it was it on the night of a full moon or something like that, when you'd be driving on the Tumbling Run Road, you're cruising along, and all of a sudden you see the lights of a car behind you, and it gets closer and closer and closer, and right before you think the thing's going to rear end you, it disappears. Which I think is kind of an interesting scenario given, our topic tonight. Mm-hmm. And there's also that, I don't know if it was a house or a hotel that supposedly is out there. I guess it's kind of like a phantom house or phantom hotel. Supposedly,
it's the hotel. The hotel.
Yeah, where
you can still see the foundation of the old hotels that were out there. And actually, I think I've at one time or another posted photos of the old Tumbling Run hotels. It used to be a very big vacation spot. And there is the one foundation as you're going out past the second dam of the reservoir, like at the very edge of it. There's a road that cuts up. Now it's gated off at the bottom. But when you look into the woods there, you can see the stone foundations of hotels and stuff like that that used to be there. And there is a hotel that magically appears to still be there at times. And people who are said to enter the hotel can leave anytime they'd like, but they can't check out.
Right.
I'm still going with the.
Well, no, you hit the nail on the head. That's kind of what I was going is, and again, this was one of those, on a certain night a year and certain conditions, this hotel, I couldn't remember if it was a hotel or a house, but this building would appear, and like you said, people would go into it, and I don't know if this thing kind of like reappeared and like if it was stuck in some kind of a parallel dimension or whatever is kind of what the story went along with. Where people would go in there, and if they didn't get out at a certain time, they were basically stuck there forever. Jesus, that scared the crap out of me.
Darby, do you agree?
It sounded like it was right behind me. I'm like, ah! Oh, man. Vince just wrote in there that his uncle used to walk there and the foundation is still visible. Thanks, Vince. Did you ever hear that story? You could write yes or no on the chat. As I'm talking to Vince, who can't talk back to me.
Yeah, that's why it had me confused earlier. I thought you may have been talking to somebody else. You're like, no. Do you know where Tumbling Run is? And I'm like, yeah, yes, yes, I do. Used to go, hunting and maybe fishing there. I'm not saying we went fishing there. I'm saying we might have went fishing there. There's also
there's tons of stories about that whole area in Tumbling Run. There's the car on Tumbling Run Road. There's supposedly in one of the two dams is supposedly a like a sea serpent, like a lake monster kind of thing, where it's like a serpent, a giant serpent-like creature that lives in one of the dams. There's the what'd you call it? Hedge cat is supposedly an ancient Indian burial ground at the top of the mountain, which I've heard about that story my entire life. I've tried to find it. I could never find it, but I know you had an experience there when you were trying to go up there the one time with, was it Kevin?
Yeah. Kevin and I took a whole bunch of people up there the one time, and we didn't make it all the way up there. Mm-hmm. We were going up the one access road, and we used to hunt coyote over there. Mm-hmm. And Kevin and I had shotguns with us, and we could see the coyote above us and below us on the access road, but far enough out that it wasn't, you wouldn't have wanted to risk shooting because you weren't really you weren't going to have a great shot. I mean, we were carrying like 20 gauge shotguns at that point. Yeah. So we see them, and every so often you'll see them flash in front of you, and they'll cross the trail. Mm-hmm. Well, there's a bend in the one trail, and as we came around the bend, there is a bear, a big-ass black bear, just standing in the middle of the trail. It was standing up, saw us, and went down on all fours and started walking towards us. And we were like, okay, we got to back up. Keep backing up, back up around the trail, back. And people that were with us were like, what's the matter? What's the matter? And we're like, just go, keep walking back the way we came.
There's all kinds of weird. Go ahead.
No, finish what you're going to say, because I was going to add another kind of phantom local to PA Phantom Hitchhiker, 2 local stories to that area.
No, I was just going to say that for anybody who's familiar with that area, the Tumbling Run mountain itself has so much, I guess, paranormal and crypto phenomenon that goes on there. Like we said, there's the car, the hotel, the little lake monster, if you want to call it that. There's the Indian burial ground, which supposedly nothing grows within the circle of the burial area. And it's so weird too, because like Chad had the experience with the coyotes and the bear, and I've heard from numerous other people, and I don't know if it's that Native American link with the burial ground, like if it's spirit animals or what, but every time people tried to get up to where this burial ground is, they were all their plans were always thwarted by some kind of wild animal encounter that kind of chased them off, and they couldn't get to their end goal in finding that burial ground. Also, the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Society had a report a few years back. It was on Tumbling Run Mountain, but it was on the Route 61 side, where I guess it was the old train tracks that they turned into a bike trail now that paralleled 61.
Yeah.
Right when you were getting towards the end, before you could make the right to go back Tumbling Run Road to where the reservoir entry is, a person was walking along that trail, and they saw two Bigfoot standing along the edge of the trail in the tree line, and they took off up the mountain. The Bigfoot took up off the mountain when the person approached. And also there was reports fairly recently, another Pennsylvania-based group, Bigfoot research group, had reports of footprints and trackways in that same area too. So there's a lot of weird stuff on that mountain in particular. But what was kind of going back to the topic, you said there's some other phantom stories in Pennsylvania that you could kind of relate to our topic tonight.
Yeah, actually, one is a little bit further out on, I guess it's 209 that runs to Tamaqua.
Mm-hmm.
There's the old Phantom drag racer.
Oh, yeah.
Where 209 runs now, if you ever look at that one section, there's like a piece of it that cuts off that's not connected to the Route 209 now.
I'm not sure where you're at.
Oh, I'm trying to remember. Not New Philly, or it might be around New Philly. One of these days when I'm back up that way, we'll take a ride and I'll show you what I'm talking about. But the actual road used to go a little bit further to the left and down. And they actually moved it because it was such a perfect straight line that people used to always drag race through there.
Uh-huh.
People would actually line up the cars too and go take off down the thing. And evidently somebody got killed back in the 50s or something, drag racing down that stretch. And now they say sometimes at night you'll actually get passed by a car. But instead of the car going the way 209 goes now, it basically looks like it's careening off the road across the traffic and basically over to the old section, the straightaway on 209 there. So it's a phantom car.
Right.
Now, if you think about another piece of Schuylkill County folklore, history, and legend, the Gordon Mountain.
Oh, yeah.
Now, it's not exactly a Phantom Hitchhiker, but it's a phantom that appears, stops your car, and searches you for the scratch marks. And then...
Well, that's the same with Peach Mountain, too. Outside of Pottsville, Peach Mountain. You remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Gordon Mountain is where you come up over the top of the hill and your car stalls. And like you were saying, this apparition, and I think both stories are actually extremely similar, where this apparition of a woman, you're driving over the mountain, your car mysteriously stalls, like Chad said, and the apparition of a woman comes through. Like, what does she sit in the dashboard? But like her butt from the waist down is in the car. She's sitting on the dashboard, and her upper body is kind of out of the car, and she leans down through the car and feels the faces of all the people within the car, because supposedly the person who raped and murdered her, she scratched their face. And she feels for like a scar on the left side of the person's face to try in an attempt to try and find her killer, which is kind of ironic. But Peach Mountain is kind of that same thing too. Remember Peach Mountain? There used to be the house and she was raped, murdered, and they dumped her body in the well that's right along the street.
Okay, that's why I was confused when you said Peach Mountain is similar, and I'm thinking, wasn't that a house? Like an old house that sat there? Yeah, okay, that
Peach Mountain. Yeah, you would drive up to the house. Remember, because we went. Oh my god, that was part of our early days of ghost hunting.
I was going to say that was one of our first official.
I still have the pictures from when we actually had to take film cameras, and we'd have to go and get everything developed and pay to get our evidence, revealed.
And people,
I remember.
Like, why do you have a picture of a dark room? Like, do you know you need lights for a camera?
We were ghost hunting. Oh, okay.
Right.
But,
sure.
Yeah, that story, you would drive up to the front of the house, flash your high beams. I think it was like 3 times you'd have to flash the high beams at the house. The female apparition would come out. Same thing. She'd go all around the car, feel the face of everybody within the vehicle, and whoever had the scar on the left side of the face, she would kill. Because that same story, I think it's the same exact scenario as Gordon Mountain, where, but except in this instance, she was raped and murdered at the house, and then they dumped her body in the well that was in front of the house.
No, Hawk Mountain was different, though. I'm answering Vince's comment. Hawk Mountain was the cannibal who was the innkeeper at the old, when it was a.
Matthias Schombacher.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think he was a cannibal. He would just.
I don't know.
No, I don't think so. He would just get wary because back in the early days, Origsburg was one of the first state marks in Pennsylvania, and the only neighboring town I think was Allentown. So, and the only route to Allentown was up and over Hawk Mountain down into Xville over the other side, and it would go down to Allentown. So when people would travel through there, Matthias, he had an inn, and he would bring them in, get them drunk, start talking, kind of find out what they had or what they, possessed. He'd get them drunk, then he'd take them up in the barn that was across the street. He'd kill them, dump their bodies down a well, and he'd keep their possessions and discard of, like, if they had a wagon or whatever, he'd get rid of all their stuff that would link him to that. And he did that to multiple people. And when he was finally caught, I guess there was a wagon, like an infantry wagon or whatever, that went up and over that road. And it was, I want to say it was carrying uniforms and artillery for, the Union Army, because this was during the time of the Civil War, and he killed the people that were transporting the goods. And the way he was caught or linked to the murders was somebody had seen him on a few occasions dressed in a Union soldier's uniform. So it was kind of a, no pun intended, but a dead giveaway. Well, what's Vince saying here? The hotel owners killed the people that stayed there and then robbed them. Also, there is said to be, Native American burial ground there as well, and people have seen an Indian man while walking the trails there. So funny that you say that, Vince, because I remember many, many years ago, back, I think I was 15 or 16, like right around when I first started to drive. I was out there with a couple of my buddies. It was my friend Chris and his friend. I didn't really know his friend very well, but we went up Hawk Mountain the one night. It was on a full moon. I remember it perfect. And we were going up towards the first, I think, is the east lookout, and there was the north lookout where there's all the boulders at the top. We were almost there, and I heard like a stick break or something. And I turned around, and I swear to you, there was an Indian standing down off the trail into the woods a little bit next to a tree. It had like a blanket or something wrapped around it, and it was like an older Indian, Native American, whatever. And it was just staring at me, and it had this just extremely sad look on its face. I'll never freaking forget that. And I remember I was like frozen with fear. The other guys took off, and I had to like finally my knee jerked and I was able to run, and God, we got the hell out of there like faster than you can imagine. I'll never forget that. And supposedly there was a large tree in the back corner of Matthias's property, and they think one of the things that drove him mad was apparently this tree. The Native Americans used to, I guess it was like a sacrificial tree, and they would sacrifice things there. So the ground held, it was sacred to the Native Americans. And I don't know if that had part of him ending up the way he was, but supposedly while Matthias was on his deathbed, right before he died, he confessed to all the murders. And when he was buried, lightning struck his body before they put it into the ground, and then it struck again, and it struck his headstone, which I thought was weird. And I have more stories about that guy, that Matthias Schombacher, and he was buried in the cemetery by the Bethany, I think it was a Bethany Catholic Church or Bethany Presbyterian Church. I don't know. If you go over Hawk Mountain out through Xville, it's all the way out. Then you'll make this left turn. It's a little old church sitting out in the middle of nowhere, and his grave is along the road.
There's a Boy Scout. There's the Boy Scout building.
Yeah, there's a Boy Scouts council building across the street from it. Yeah, absolutely.
We've been there.
And if you're facing the church, oh my gosh, yeah. Well, I took Leslie out there the one time, and she got an amazing EVP. I think she was talking to Matthias, and I think she had asked, "Are you still here?" or something like that. And you hear it clear as day, and I think we still have the EVP. You can hear it goes, yes. I mean, it was perfectly clear. But I think if you're facing the church, the cemetery is on the left. There's a little embankment, which has a story to it, but we'll save that for another topic or another show. But his is the third grave in from the right.
I actually got chased by dogs.
Don't go on any. We're gonna make a show out of that. Because there's so many stories. Don't elaborate.
Yeah.
But that would definitely, there's enough stories and enough history with what we're talking about that it could definitely make an hour's show. So we'll save that.
Yeah, I actually, when we were talking about some of these, I kind of actually remember a story that happened out. I want to say it was in Washington State. Mm-hmm. And basically, it was relayed back in the 90s. But basically, a guy was driving, and it was kind of, now this wasn't in the 90s. This was earlier, but the guy told the story back in the 90s. And he's driving along this desolate road section, and this car starts tailgating him. Mm-hmm. And then shoots out into the other lane and starts motioning for him to pull over. And there's 3 people in the car. And he's he's by himself. It's, he's doing a road trip type thing. I think he said it was the 60s or 70s when this happened to him, maybe late 60s, early 70s. He's like, I'm not pulling over. And they kind of shot back behind him, and they were still tailgating him. They're flipping their headlights, and they zoom back around. And they're motioning him for him to pull over. And he gets a little bit of ways down the road, and all of a sudden he gets a flat tire. Mm-hmm. So he sees an old house, an older house, along the road. So he sees a guy standing at a pickup truck. Mm-hmm. So he figures, I'm going to pull over here, over towards the guy's house in his driveway. And this car pulls in behind him that has been flashing their high beams and, trying to get him to pull over. And basically he kind of described the people in the car as kind of looking like, maybe some early bikers or something like that were trying to basically, highway robbery type stuff. And he pulled into the house. He saw the guy. The car pulls in behind him, like I said. And he's looking in his mirror, and he sees the passenger of the car pointing towards the house and the guy in the truck. Now, the guy in the truck is not acknowledging what's going on at all. Like, he's working on his pickup. And it was early morning, so he thought, okay, the guy maybe he's getting ready for work and the truck ain't working right, so he's just trying to, get it running or something. So he sees the people in the car looking over at the house, pointing at the house, and they seem very frantic. They drive off. He gets out, just changes his tire, drives on. Yeah, thinks nothing of it, doesn't see the car again. Well, on his return trip, he thought, for some reason, he was going to keep an eye out for that house. Basically, I think kind of keeping an eye out for that car also.
Right.
So when he's driving down the road, he gets by the old house, except for the old house is overgrown with bushes. And there's no vehicles anywhere. There's no way that somebody was living in it. It looks nothing like the house he saw the day that he got stopped there because of the flat tire.
Sorry, I just had a little technical difficulty there. I had our voices were. Did you hear that?
No.
I had what you were saying was like playing back double. It was very strange. It blew into my headphones. It was really, really loud.
Oh,
you didn't hear that?
No, I don't hear though. That's my problem. I don't really hear
that just totally. I didn't mean to cut you off, but that totally freaked me out because you're sitting there talking, and all of a sudden it was like things you said just before.
Okay.
I don't know. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I did not mean to interrupt the story. Continue.
Yeah. Well, it was basically the end of the story, but basically, he found the house, and the house was overrun with bushes and, just dilapidated and stuff like that. And so it was almost like a Phantom Hitchhiker, but a Phantom house and people living at the house. Because like he said, the people in the car behind him acted super frantic and panicked when they were pointing over at the house. So, you know what I mean? Like, they evidently knew that, something was wrong. Something wasn't, the norm for that area.
Right.
But I mean, I'm sure, there's even in Chicago, there's other Phantom Hitchhiker stories, not just Resurrection Mary. There is like the Flapper and stuff like that, where it's a woman dressed like in Flapper clothing that they see.
From the 20s. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, wasn't there a case study done on Phantom Hitchhikers?
Yeah, but there's actually a Gettysburg Phantom Hitchhiker.
Ooh, talk about that, and then we'll get into the case study, and then we're gonna have to wrap it up because we're getting over our segment time.
When they were filming the movie Gettysburg, they asked townspeople, because they did film some of the movie on the actual battlefield.
Right.
So they were asking town people that had pickup trucks would be paid like $50 a day if you would pick up the extras from in town and drive them out to where they were shooting the scenes. So all these people with pickup trucks were like, you're going to pay me $50 for the next, 6 weeks a day to make 2 trips that I'll probably make anyway.
Yeah.
So when the one night they'd finished shooting, and they were actually heading into town, and they were all going to meet up at the Farnsworth. Because that's where most of the stars of the movie used to eat dinner. That's why inside Sweeney's is all the movie stuff.
Yeah,
because that's where they used to all hang out to eat dinner.
And I love that place.
They're driving back from the battlefield, and the lady picks up 8 reenactors. She counts them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, that's my load. I'm heading out. They drive all the way back through the battlefield. Now, it's, early summer when they film. They're driving all the way back through the battlefield. They get to the roundabout, the circle in town. They would pull over, and they'd let the reenactors out, and then they would disperse and, go to different hotels.
Right.
Well, she gets out of her truck to drop the tailgate so they didn't have to try to jump out of the truck with all their gear. And I mean, they're packed in Civil War era uniforms, and they got canteens and powder and musket and all the the stuff that they would have. Plus, a lot of them had stuff that make it look like they were in camp. So they had their tents, they had all this stuff.
Right.
So she goes to open the tailgate, and she counts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And she's standing there. She's like, I picked up 8. And she's like, but there's only 6 in the back.
Mm-hmm.
So she starts talking to the 6 of them that are there. And they're like, yeah, there were 2 other guys with us when we left the set.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, well, did they hop out like going through town at the light? Or, did they just jump out because you're going slow? And, they're like, no, we don't remember them getting out of the vehicle. That we don't, you would see somebody jump out of a vehicle if you were sitting next to them.
Right.
2 of them, neither one on either side of the truck or 2 on one side, you would see them hop out of a truck. They're
Right.
not doing the scuba diving roll backwards out of the truck into the concrete. But yeah, they actually, and it wasn't the only time it was reported while they were filming. But that was one of the ones that I remember being told was like, and to this day, the woman says, look, I picked up 8 people. I saw 8 men get in the back of my truck. We pulled in the square. 6 men got out of the back of my truck. And the story from those 6 men has always been that we don't know where they got out. We never saw them leave. So that's kind of a Phantom Hitchhiker story.
Jeez.
So now there was a study done by Beardsley and Hankey. It was undertaken in 1942 through 43. They were both American folklorists.
Is that Beardsley and Hankey? Sounds like it should be some kind of like comedy show or something like that, right? All right, Beardsley and Hankey show, guys. All right.
I was thinking more of like a folk music group.
Oh yeah.
Hi, we're Beardsley and Hankey, and we're going to sing.
Yeah.
But basically, it was a survey that they took, and it was they got 79 written accounts, so it's short of 100. So it's not really this great survey. But they basically vanishing hitchhikers, and they drew stories from across the country. And I'm reading my notes on the stats here for you folks. 4 distinct different versions became distinguishable because of obvious differences in development and essence. And they're described as a story where the hitchhiker gives an address through which the motorist learns he's giving a ride to a ghost. Mm-hmm. So like a dilapidated, or burnt down house, or a house that's no longer there type situation.
Mm-hmm.
Now 49 of Beardsley and Hankey's greatest stories. I was making a joke. It didn't work. Sorry. Samples fell in that category from 16 different states in the U.S. Story B, which was stories where the hitchhiker is an old woman who prophesizes disaster or the end of World War II. Now, you got to remember this was done in 42 and 43, so the end of World War II would be a big deal at that point.
Right.
Subsequent inquiries likewise reveal her to be deceased. 9 of the samples that fit this description, 8 of these came from the vicinity of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And they believe that the origins of the Resurrection Mary stories basically start about 1933. That deal with that. And I'm trying to go through their notes on it real quick, just to kind of give you the
shortened form.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, that really doesn't pertain to the Phantom Hitchhikers. It's more just, different little side caveat notes on stuff.
Right.
Story C is where the girl is met at some place of entertainment, a dance, instead of the side of the road.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she leaves some token, often an overcoat she borrowed from the motorist on her grave, or by
Contraceptive.
what's that?
Is it a contraceptive? She leaves it.
Which corroborates the experience and her identity because it's that later I found my coat on Mary's grave. Woo!
Yeah.
And that was uniform among separate accounts of this variant led by Beardsley and Hankey to strongly doubt it was folklore.
Mm-hmm.
Beardsley and Hankey's greatest hits. Now, here's an interesting one. Version D of Beardsley and Hankey's greatest hits are stories where the hitchhiker is later identified as a local divinity. This is an interesting one. It comes out of Kingston, New York in 1941. Beardsley and Hankey were particularly interested in this because the vanishing hitchhiker was subsequently identified as the late Mother Canabi, who is from the local Cabrini.
Yeah.
Cabrini. Yeah, whatever. One person's watching it. It's probably Leslie. She's going to yell at us.
Yeah.
Could you stop
probably listening just to make sure I don't say anything stupid.
Well, that's hard to do. But she was from the local Sacred Heart Orphanage. So it was very interesting that, it was a local person of religious importance and like for people to see her of all people, was a very significant thing in their research.
Mm-hmm. Now, didn't they say that this version was kind of like a version B glimpsed in transition with version D? So it was kind of like what we were talking about with the Resurrection Mary, where it's not really a residual; it's intelligent kind of
an anniversarial intelligent kind of.
Yeah.
I just made that term up. So if anybody wants to steal it from me,
no, we're gonna copyright that. But so this would have been like the impending doom kind of prophetic kind of story mixed with the, I guess, local legend kind of thing. So it'd be more of a local thing kind of that's giving you the prophetic gloom and doom.
Yeah. Basically Beardsley and Hankey concluded that version A was the closest to the original form of the story, containing the essential elements of the legend. Version B and D, they believed, were more localized variations, while C was supposed to have started its life as a separate ghost story and at some stage became conflated with the original Vanishing Hitchhiker stories.
So that concludes Beardsley and Hankey's greatest hits.
Hi, we're Beardsley and Hankey. Hey, we could be Beardsley and you could be Hankey.
Yeah, that's our new show.
Beardsley and Hankey.
Make fun of things.
Beardsley and Hankey Paranormal.
That's right.
Oh, let me give you some.
Say there that one of their conclusions certainly seems reflected in the continuation of Vanishing Hitchhiker stories. The hitchhiker is, in the majority of cases, female, and the lift giver male, which is kind of interesting. Because, again, like the story with my dad, it was a female, he was a male. Resurrection Mary, a lot of these different stories kind of follows that instance.
But you also got to think about time frame.
Mm-hmm.
1942 to 1943. And these stories date prior to that. There probably weren't a ton of women driving at that point.
True.
Yeah. So, I mean, samples contain 47 young female apparitions, 14 old lady apparitions, and 14 more of indeterminate age.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would love to know, is there a female Joan Jett, was it Joan Jett song, where she met him?
No, that was Heart, wasn't it?
Was it? I don't know. I don't know crappy
Was
music.
a rainy night. Yeah, I think that was Heart. When it came into sight. I don't know.
Yeah. So, I mean, I wonder if there's like a female Resurrection Dave. Mary's a common name. Dave's a common name. I was just going with it.
Wasn't that the Hitchhiker story Erection Dave?
Okay, now you can...
All right, now we're getting off topic here. Sorry, damn. I always know.
Can't make it to the end of the show.
Always the end of the show. The look you gave was priceless. You're like, idiot. Oh, man. Well, you know what, buddy? We've been on for an hour and a half now. I think it's time we could wrap this piece up.
Okay.
All right, before I really get into some kind of a dumbass story.
Yep. So I'd like to thank you, Les, for co-hosting tonight, doing such a great show. I'd also like to thank the audience for coming along with us on this trip, and hopefully we weren't too silly or boring this evening.
Yeah, no, I'd like to thank you as well, my friend, for always being by my side as every week. And I want to apologize to everybody for the start of this show. We kind of we got a rocky start. Jeez, I don't know what was going on. We just were kind of out of sync. So I do apologize for that. We try and make the show a little bit more entertaining and not so cluster effed, but hey, what can you do? We're busy guys throughout the week, and we try and do this for everybody, and not just as something that we're passionate about. It's just we try and do it for everybody as kind of entertainment and enjoyment, and we'll get it down soon. we'll get our formats down tighter. But anything you want to plug, buddy?
You can reach us at explorersgroup.com, Twitter at explorersgroup, or on Facebook, which if you're watching us on Facebook, you already clearly know how to get a hold of us on Facebook. Know
how to find us. That's right.
You can check out our videos on our YouTube. We will be moving a lot of our past episodes off of our Facebook page and just onto our YouTube page, which is actually
our website.
Which is linked to our website, so you can find them on both those services. And very excited, our next show will be something.
Oh, not to cut you off. Hold that excitement. Hold it, keep it bottled up, buddy. But let's not forget that we are working diligently on getting our shows reformatted. It's an easy process. We're gonna get the shows converted to MP3, so we're going to be uploading them to iTunes hopefully soon, so that way you guys could enjoy our shows as a podcast. It's a little bit easier to listen to us that way rather than worrying about the video aspect. You could kind of we'll archive on iTunes as well, so we'll keep the live show going as long as we can. And like Chad said, every week we're going to be transferring the shows off of Facebook and onto our YouTube and our personal group page or group website, explorersgroup.com. So check us out there. We're going to be on iTunes. And now we could talk about the next week's show. Go take it away, bud.
I'm no longer excited about it.
Well, God, get excited.
Beardsley and Hanky do not get excited.
Let's not Hall & Oates this. Gotta stick together.
Well, I'll fake excitement now. I'm very excited about next week's show. No, actually, I am. It's a very cool show. It kind of brings us back to a big piece of American Bigfoot
folklore,
legend, lore. And it is the legend of Boggy Creek of the Falco, Arkansas area, a place I visited.
Lucky.
Yeah, well, you know, it's not exactly that thriving of a metropolis when you go there. But it is definitely, you know, if anybody's seen the movie, it's definitely not the second or whatever version of it that came out years later, but the original is a quite interesting telling of a town's dealing with a reported sighting of a Sasquatch, Bigfoot, Yeti,
swamp monster. That is a really good point. The legend of Boggy Creek, be it a very poorly produced 70s documentary-esque movie, it is one of the what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of one of the original films that got a lot of people into the Bigfoot and cryptozoology kind of world. I know for me, I've seen it when I was a kid and stuff like that, and it sparked my interest, along with Harry and the Hendersons, of course. That was the biggest one for me. But it is definitely one of the originators that got people into the whole phenomenon of Bigfoot and the possibility of a Sasquatch creature. So the Falk Monster, the Legend of Boggy Creek, and like Chad said, you want to make sure you see the original, because there is a follow-up, Return to Boggy Creek, which is still good in its own right. And then there's a few more after that, and they just get a little bit more silly and not so much a documentary about the creature. They're more Hollywoodized, I guess, if you could say.
Well, you also got to remember the original one is the actual townspeople playing. You know, it's a docudrama. If you kind of think of it, it's part documentary, part theatrical reenactments of the scenarios and stuff like that happened during it. But it is definitely, as somebody who's visited that area, it is definitely something that these people still live with and still, you know, claim to be dealing with. So, you know, like I said, I've been there. It's a very interesting area. In that part of the world, it's definitely an area where if there is a Bigfoot type creature, it definitely would be a good habitat for it. So that's my excitement for next week.
Yeah. And if we're lucky, we're going to try to get a special guest on with that show, but don't hold your breath.
We're going to try to get the actual Falk Monster to appear live on there.
Yeah, he's shy, he's reclusive, but we're going to give it our all. So, but I mean, on that note, I just have to say goodnight, folks, and please remember the Falk Monster will be our next show, and keep up to date with everything we're doing on our different media outlets, and have a good night. Chad?
Night.